Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July 2023 episode of the Leather Chronicles. Our guest this evening is Thom Butts, Leatherman title holder, patron, and holder of a unique perspective on a couple of legends of the leather community. I think we're really going to enjoy his stories tonight. Do want to go ahead and remind everybody that this Wednesday is your Wednesday off. In 2 weeks, we have Librarian Speaks. 3 weeks will be the after party, and the the fourth Wednesday of next month will be Miss Vi Johnson telling the story of why I'm who I am. This is allegedly the story of why Mom is the kind of person to gather all of our history and put it in one place for us all. And then in September, we have Judy Tallwing McCarthy. So that's the upcoming Leather Chronicles. Thom, it is a pleasure to have you tonight. I like what you've done with the place. You've made me think about going a little more formal next time. So I'll start with the question we start with everyone. With the benefit of hindsight, when was your first kinky inclinations?
A lot of hindsight. Yeah, things that didn't really, dots weren't connected until decades later. But I grew up on a cattle farm in rural Portland, Oregon. And my first kind of thought, again in retrospect, was playing with the castrating rubber bands. My dad had this kind of four-prong thingy. It spread out, and a band to band the balls on the calves. And it's like, oh, that was fun. And I actually tried it. It's like, no.
Not a toy. This is not a toy.
Yeah, not a toy. And yeah. Yes. But growing up, I was in Boy Scouts, actually a very active troop. Oh, by the way, I did make Eagle Scout, by the way.
That was the question that came to mind.
Yes, I was. And assistant scoutmaster and assistant SM. You have the patch. But excelled on my rope work, my knots and stuff. Was fun. And then, but it wasn't, kind of wasn't until after I came out as gay, mid late 80s. And then, as gay men, we're sort of presented with a lot of the different archetypes, kind of what kind of a gay are you going to be? I know, it's funny. My boyfriend at the time, kind of pushing towards the blonde, twink. Yeah, I was, but not blonde, but twink. But always kind of gravitated towards, liked, appreciated the Tom of Finland drawings and the more butch Leatherman style. So always kind of graduated that, or gravitated that way. And then early 90s, acquired some leather gear, jacket and chaps. Didn't have a motorcycle at the time. That came a few years later, but then kind of got into the leather community almost to the back door, more on the motorcycle side of leather than the BDSM side of leather.
Okay, I was to say, you can't say that you got in through the back door of leather. That brings up interesting imagery, so I want to go there.
Yeah, but into the leather culture, the leather scene through motorcycle gear. and motorcycling, which is, a strong and arguably origin point of the leather community, um, but not so much anymore. Um, so yeah, so that's how and why I acquired my first sets of leathers. Yeah, you
So
started to look like you say.
you started perverting farm equipment? Is this
Uh,
what?
no, no, it's long after the farm.
No, I was talking
Um,
about that, but that was the origin. This is interesting.
yeah, ooh, this is fun.
Oh, that could have been bad if you tried it on yourself. So,
I did for a hot minute.
oh wow, that's extreme right off the bat.
Very, very short. Yeah, couple seconds. It's like no, 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 no.
So this is what age with the
Oh,
farm implements are interesting.
farm implements. Um, Probably very early teenager.
Okay,
Rough guess.
right. And then high schoolish, you come out
College.
college. Okay, okay. And you backdoor into Tom of Finland and
Yeah,
the hypersexual, hyper masculine sexualized leather.
yeah,
So okay,
kind of both.
right,
But yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So how and where did you find leather community?
Um, at the Eagle Bar in Portland, Eagle PDX. Um, put on my chaps and my vest and um went and enjoyed and had a good time. Um, Couple years later, early mid 90s, a friend of mine says, "Oh, well, why don't you come to Portland Leatherman?" Like, what's that? Like, and that's where I really found community. Um,
Okay, tell me
the
before you get ahead. Tell me about the Eagle. What's your first night? Are you one of the stories where it took you a few weeks to work up the gumption to go? Did you just decide to go and pop in? How was the Eagle on your first time?
um Good question. Honestly, I don't remember. I remember going, but details no. I do remember late college era. There was an all age bar across the street, City Nightclub, uh, locally legendary. Um, that my boyfriend at the time would go to because again we were underage.
Mm.
It's like, oh, the Eagle, what's that? It's like, oh, you don't want to go there. All right. Few years later, different boyfriend, partner. It's like Eagle. Oh yeah, let's go. All right. Um, yeah. No real specific memories or yeah, impressions of the bar at the time. Um, it was it was a great place to hang out at. It was a great place to be at. Um, yeah, lots of good times there over the years.
Do you remember the crowd? What was the crowd like?
Um, the crowd was a little mixed, fairly leathery. The Eagle PDX at the time was kind of the end of the edge of the gay strip, Southeast Stark Street in Portland. Um, at the time, probably a dozen different gay bars down the road, and the Eagle at the very north end of it,
Okay.
north end, west end, edge of it. Yeah, what direction am I? Um, uh, A lot of the gay bars have migrated off or closed or changed locations. But Southeast Stark, that strip of it actually has been renamed to Harvey Milk, Southeast Harvey
Nice.
Milk Place here in Portland, which is a nice tribute to the, the formerly gay strip. And even the Eagle is moved off of Stark and in a different part of town. But
But does still exist.
um, uh, it the Eagle PDX relocated and then closed. Someone else started an Eagle Portland in a different part of town. So for a while, Portland had two Eagles. Allegedly the only city in the world that had two Eagle bars. I don't know. But Eagle Portland versus Eagle PDX. Eagle Portland is still around. Great place to be, hang out. The Leather Scotch and Cigar Social, first Friday every night. Leather, rubber, uniform, etc. Lure. Fourth Saturdays, I think it is. Um, Naked pool nights on Tuesday, etc., etc. It's a little bit of a still kind of a neighborhood bar feel, um, but there's usually a few folk in leather, and especially on the at least on the Scotch and cigar nights, quite a good leather crowd.
Very cool. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you. Go
Yeah.
ahead with your finding community. That's my next
But
question.
okay. Finding community. So early mid 90s, a friend said, why don't you come to the Portland Leatherman? Like, what is that? Um, Portland, Oregon does not have a leather club in the traditional sense. Portland Leatherman, closest thing there is, has been going on at this point for 35 years, something insane.
Wow.
However, it is just exclusively just a potluck group.
Okay.
Yeah, Portland food. I don't know. So second Saturday every month, we gather at someone's house. Everyone brings a dish to share, and it's communion. Um,
And
no dress code, although it's leather folk, whatever they're wearing. Um, no bylaws, no politics, no BS, no drama, not a hook up place. Um, just Leatherman sharing a meal over with around the table with friends. Um,
and this is what it was like mid 90s when you found it.
yes,
Very
yes.
nice. That's
That
very cool.
is it is. It's weird. It's weird. I understand, totally weird in the leather community. I totally understand. Um, but that's where you find the leather folk. Um, some really lovely people that really know their shit. Um, and don't necessarily go out to the bars. Um, but their history, their knowledge, all that stuff. It was over there around the table over, I don't know, casserole and potato salad or whatever whatever was brung.
So some
Um,
significant kind of leather conversation is going on over these potluck dinners.
yes, yes. Um, it was. And that's kind of where I found my leather community and kind of still where I settled in at. Um, there's been a couple attempts at more of a traditional leather club, shall we say,
Mhm.
in the Portland area. They tend to not last more than a couple years, um, for better or worse. Uh, but Portland Leatherman is still going strong. Kind of a pause during COVID years, of course, but yeah, it's still going strong. About, yeah, a little over 35 years on, I think, at this point.
Okay.
So
So mid 90s, you found your community, and you've got what kind of crowd did you have? A lot of elders, a lot, elders and new folks. What was the mix like?
Um, a lot of elders, as I say, a lot of the people, um, 20 years my senior, were coming to the potlucks. Some people my age, my generation, a few younger, still kind of the rough mix.
Mm.
Um, yeah, yeah, I think that answers the question. Well, keep talking.
Yeah,
Ask me more
yeah.
questions.
Well, I was just curious because if we're talking mid '90s, we're you're starting to come out of the worst of the plague,
Yeah.
and you still have elders around, which is saying something. Uh, a lot of places that wasn't the case. So that's kind of why I was asking about
Mm.
having elders around. So you still had folks that had been around for, what kind of time frames are the older folks that are there? 20,
Uh,
30.
Now they are in their 70s and 80s.
Okay. So they're still around.
Then, and a lot of them are, well, some of them are still around.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And they would talk about, as I say, it was a potluck group. It is a potluck group. Um, no politics, no agenda. At the end of the meal, after the meal, they kind of gather everyone's attention, thank the host, and then do community announcements. What's going on in the community, what events to attend, fundraisers, dungeon parties. So that's kind of how the word got spread. It's like, oh, so and so, they're doing a dungeon party, or they're doing a this social, or the Pigs of Portland, the Red Hanky socials. Um, so that's kind of where that stuff got announced and spread around. And then, if you had questions or wanted to know more about it, you kind of go over to the person that announced it afterwards and say,
Hey, what was that?
tell, tell me about that. What can I, and yeah, it's like it was, yeah, very friendly, welcoming. Yeah, yes, there's a
It
big
really
approach.
sounds awesome. It really does. I mean, it
Yeah,
does sound awesome to me. Having lots of folks with lots of experience around, just openly sharing and telling stories, and answering questions and just talking about whatever
over dinner.
over dinner.
Yeah, again,
So
totally weird in the leather community, but it works. It works in Portland.
this is mid '90s, and this heads you down the road to running for a title. Yes.
Yes.
How does that, tell me the story of going from potluck dinners to running for a title?
Yeah. So the title. Um, I at that point I was really pretty oblivious of the title holder system and of all that.
Mhm.
Um, my partner at the time lived in Tacoma, Washington, about 2 hours north of Portland. And I had was up there a certain weekend, and Sunday night when I drove home, there was an application for this thing called Mr. Oregon State Leather in my mailbox at the house. I was like, but I called up my partner and was like, Jerry, what's this? Oh, well, I was talking with Dustin, and he and I think you need to apply and run. What? Yeah.
This sounds familiar. Please continue. It's like I've heard this story, or I've been a part of the story, or something. So they sneak it in your mailbox and
Yes.
get it on your mind.
Dustin had dropped it in my mailbox at the house. I knew Dustin through Portland Leatherman. Uh, Super nice guy. Liked him, respected him. Um, uh, I don't remember. I may have even talked to him too. But filled out the application. That was, as I say, that was the Sunday night. Filled out the application. I think he dropped by the house on a Tuesday night and picked it up, or a Wednesday night and picked it up on the way to the Leather family barbecue. Uh, for the contest meet and greet on Friday.
Now, how far from you getting the application to the event?
Sunday,
Like,
Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
oh, days?
Days.
Wow.
Days. Yes. Yes. So all the people that think, oh, I need more time, say, I had days.
No sympathy from me.
Yeah. No, yeah, you just need to do it. Just drop it and do it.
Well, the nice thing is you didn't have to fret about it or worry about it or think too much about it because it was there.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And all of my ignorance and all my, I have no idea what the, yeah, just did it. So the background and what I what I learned about my history after the fact is Portland, Oregon has a strong and long storied history in the leather community. There were several leather titles prior to me, a Mr. Oregon leather title, drummer titles, Portland leather most recently. Um, what had transpired was the owner of the Mr. Portland leather um, apparently kind of got in a snit um, and took his marbles and went home. So the then current Mr. Portland leather uh, didn't really have a step down. There was no other title. Um, but as part of that, uh, Barry Burns, um, talked with a couple other people, Al McGuire, Dustin Posner, as I mentioned, and Jeff Rose, uh, all of which I think, except for Dustin, I think all of which had leather titles of one flavor or another, um, decided that Portland needed a community-based organization to run the leather title. So they formed an organization called Blackout Leather Productions and started the Mr. Ms. Oregon State Leather title.
Okay.
There was, as I say, there was a previous Mr. Oregon Leather, but I was the first Mr. Oregon State Leather. That was in March. The contest and Leather Pride Week was the first week of August. So August 1997, filled out my application. 2 days later, I was up on stage at the meet and greet and pulling my number and running for a title that I had no idea.
How many contestants?
There were 4 contestants for Mr. and 3 for Miss.
Okay.
Which was awesome because that's seldom been repeated in the Oregon leather titles. But and surprisingly, I came out on top. It was really close between me and the first runner up. But yeah, judges chose me. Um, in a pantheon of leather who's who, as I now realize. Jeff Hennis out of Seattle, Judy Tong McCarthy, Tony DeBlas, Susie Shepard, and a couple others. Yeah, all the Illuminati.
Were contestants?
They were my judges.
They were your judges. That makes sense. That's a pretty good panel.
Because also they're all Portlanders, so it wasn't expensive to bring them in. Jeff Hennis came down from Seattle, but Judy I think was living up north a little bit too. But they're all kind of local. So Susie Shepard is in Portland. Tony was just south of Portland. So they're all, yeah, despite the names, they're all kind of local Portland people.
Okay.
Um,
What was there a platform? Was it still a little less service oriented and something else? What was the purpose? What did you do with your
wait,
title?
wait, yes, this was 97. My obligations were to host a fundraiser by myself, a fundraiser with my Ms. I think that was it.
Okay. And the fundraisers helped
Local charities.
local charities. Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that was your title year was fundraising and helping local charities. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is what that's the evolution of the titles. So excellent. So where do we go from title holder? Oh,
Where do you know?
I was laughing a second ago. I can give you you're talking about the I need time to prepare for a title, and you get to go, huh? You said it was really close between you and the first runner up.
Mhm.
As the first runner up that missed by 1 point, I'm going to give you a don't talk to me about close. Unless yours was 1.2. Just that's why I was laughing above the go. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I got one of those for you too. So so from title holder, how did that change? How did being a title holder affect your journey?
How did it affect me? I felt as kind of the first Mr. Oregon State, I needed to kind of be everywhere and do everything to promote the title and all that. Um, Again, with my partner at the time being in Seattle ish, Tacoma actually, that also made it easy to be up in Seattle and be seen up there with the sash or back patch,
Mhm.
title vest. Um, uh, Migrated over to Boise at one point, went down to Folsom Street. Um, but didn't do a lot of travel otherwise, but was everywhere in Portland at the time.
So
Uh,
mostly local in state, maybe with a couple of trips out.
very much so. Yeah, and despite the state being in the title, it was all just Portland.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So where does your journey head from after your title year?
After there, um, after I stepped down, spent a year wandering in the desert. Yeah, a lot. It was a big paradigm shift in my head to not be a title holder anymore, to not be out there. I I felt I couldn't or shouldn't kind of be as visible the year after I stepped down because the new title holder should have been, and I wanted him to be out there and be visible. So I didn't want to be in his way.
Making space. Making
Yeah,
space. Yeah.
exactly. Um, but that left me a lot of wondering where I am and what my role is in the community. Um, uh, After about a year, I actually joined the board of Blackout Leather Productions as treasurer, and did that for a number of years. So, well, a handful of years, and then came back on years later as for another handful of years as president stuff. So a lot of community give back and support and stuff like that.
Stepping into leadership, making things happen, taking care of the community, that sort of stuff. Excellent.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. So that brings us to where?
Brings us to where? Um, I'm gonna digress a bit on the story. Um, because well, let's see here. Uh, One of my judges always did a holiday party So because he was a judge, actually I got an invite to their holiday party that winter. That would be Tony DeBlas and Andrew Charles, their annual holiday party down there. So wasn't sure what I was getting into, but yeah, went down, I think kind of leather light. Probably had a leather vest on and boots, but I didn't know
Didn't
what
go
dress
full
code was
cow.
for this
Didn't go
fancy
full
party.
cow.
Yeah. Um, so got to meet Tony on a more personable level. And that's also first time I had met Andrew. Um, got I apparently I made my P's and Q's enough or something, but stayed on the invite list and was invited back for several years to the holiday party. Always had a good time. They were quite good hosts, quite the entertainers, and had built a house that was built for entertaining, and so could throw quite the shindig.
Right.
Um,
For the
yeah.
folks who may not know, can just tell us who Tony and Andrew were.
Okay. Andrew Charles and Tony DeBlas. As I say, Tony was one of my judges when I ran for Mr. Oregon State. When I ran for International Mr. Leather, he was also one of the judges then. So double judged by him, I guess, whatever. Yeah. Um, Yeah, he actually came over in the prep for IML. He and a couple other I want to say Susie Shepherd too. Susie Shepherd came over to the house to kind of prep me for the IML judging and all that. So
Nice.
Tony DeBlas, famous for a few things. Um Probably most notably, publisher of Drummer magazine, originated, uh, oh, ah, totally, Spaces his newsletter. God, Vi, help me out.
Uh,
Um,
you've got
Dungeon
Dungeon
Master magazine.
Master. Yeah,
Yeah,
Dungeon Master.
started Dungeon Master magazine, which springboarded into Drummer magazine. Co-founder of the Leather Archives and Museum, um, and a few other things.
Yeah, Sam
San
Utopian.
Utopia Guardian, yes. Um,
Leather Pride Flag.
uh,
One of the little things he did.
yeah, one of the other little things. Yeah, created the
Yeah.
Leather Pride flag. Um, yeah, all of that.
And Andrew, who I imagine most people probably aren't as aware of, was
Andrew was Tony's partner for almost 25 years. Um, they had met at a Christmas or New Year's Eve party. And it's your Tony died in July. That December would have been their 25th anniversary.
wow. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, so
Yeah.
you went, you ran again. Did you have more time to prepare for this title run than you did for the
For
first?
for IML?
Well, you were Northwest Leather, sir.
Oh, Northwest Leather, sir.
How does that come about? You just
So
glutton
had
for punishment? You wanted to do it again?
mm, um was not looking for another title. Start off there. Um let's see here. Who was it? I think that uh who was running the Leather Sir Northwest? Gene Romaine out of Seattle was running the Leather Sir. Um, Quick digression. I mentioned Drummer magazine before. Drummer title, international drummer. Um, After Andrew and Tony sold Drummer, uh, it they sold it to Rob of Amsterdam. It lingered for a little bit and then kind of went away. The title, Mr. Drummer, International Drummer, morphed into the International Leather Sir, Leather Boy title in International Community Boot Black, ICBB. Got to remember the boot
know
blacks.
a couple of those.
Yes, got to remember the boot blacks.
Yeah, always.
So Leather Sir titles. It was still run on the drummer model. So it was each is regionalized. Each region in the US and Canada needed to put forth a contestant every year, a sir and a boy, and preferably a boot black. The ILSB ICBB was changing from a October contest to a sort of a midsummer contest. Memory's vague. Sorry, been a while. So Gene Romaine of the Northwest Leather Sir Leather Boy title needed kind of a placeholder for that 8-month title, and asked if I was interested. My partner Dominic at the time, and I talked about it. We were appointed Northwest Leather Sir Leather Boy, and then competed for International Leather Sir Leather Boy 2006, 7, something. Just before the title changed to the different time frame, and after that.
How was the run for international?
Fine.
Old hat
Yeah.
at this point. You had time to prepare. Wasn't a. I'm just curious. I've run for two, and they were June and August. So I'm not familiar with the spread out time. So
Yeah.
basically, you take Northwest Leather Sir as a community service to the contest.
As a placeholder, really.
Yes.
For got a back patch, but yes, as a placeholder for the Northwest region to compete at International Leather Sir. The prep, the ILSB ICBB contest is more involved than International Mr. Leather. So there's it's more of a player title. So there's uh demos that we had to do. We had to do a scene for as part of the run. So that was a lot of staging and blocking for the boy and I, my partner at the time, eventually, and husband too, now ex-husband, and I, to do a scene together. We did it with our boot black. So it was involved that way. The contest was fine. Had a great time, as I say. So I didn't win. My ex-husband, came in first runner-up for International Leather Boy. So proud of him for that.
Very nice.
As he said, it was great to have a title and no responsibilities.
I wouldn't know anything about that. No, I think it's interesting to discuss different runs for different titles. For anybody that would be considering or thinking about running, hearing about what the process is like is very interesting. And you did it more than once, so you had different experiences. There were different factors and things that you had to do for each one. So I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
Plus you had some folks, some pretty heavy folks helping you out. Is the IML run tied to that time period?
No. The IML was 1998.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
that was after Mr. Oregon State.
Actually still in the year of.
Right.
I won the title in early August. I competed the following May of 98. And then I had 3-4 months of quiet time before I got to step down.
So tell us briefly a little bit about what's it like to run for IML.
What's it like to run for IML? Amazing, life-changing, mind-blowing experience in a phrase. Um, the sense of brotherhood, the sense of community, the sense of almost a bigger purpose was so strong, incredibly powerful. Um, yeah,
How many
there
contestants do you remember?
there was nothing quite like that. So I competed in 98. That was their 20th, dating myself. That was their 20th annual. The IML this May was what, 45th?
25.
There's
25. It was 25, Tom.
yeah, no, it was more than that. Yeah, I'm old, I admit it. These gray hairs, I earned them. Um, yeah. It's yeah, it was amazing, amazing experience. Truly nothing like it in my lifetime. Um, yeah. Hard to put into words.
No,
I'm
not
throwing
a
a
problem.
few at him. That's
We're getting the feel. We're getting the feel.
yeah.
Roughly, do you
I'm
remember how many contestants?
contestants. That was their biggest contestant field at the time. I want to say 45, 47,
Wow.
something.
Wow.
Because like, everyone wanted to run for the 20th annual.
Right.
Um, yeah,
IML 20. Yeah, I can see that. Cool.
little did they
So,
know.
I know I have a question, and I think it probably fits in somewhere around here.
Okay.
Wolf, do you have that question lined up? I think we're in the right time frame.
Um, what happened to the Oregon Leather History Project, and how did it function when it was active?
Tell us, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that and then get the question?
Okay. First off, it is still active. So the Oregon Leather History Project was started by Andy Mangels in, I want to say about 2005. He kind of did it as Andy has a long history in the leather community and in the Portland leather community, and the broader gay community. I was just looking at the gay comics series, like number like 14, 15, 16. He was the editor of those. Um, but had in the way back in the day, but had never held a title. About 2005, someone should fact check me on that year. He decided to run for a title himself. So ran for Mr. Oregon State Leather and won. Part of his platform was history, and as part of that, he created and still manages the Oregon Leather History Project. It's largely just kind of run out of his basement or slash storage unit. He is endeavoring to save, archive, capture, preserve uh, the leather history of Portland, Oregon, and the Northwest, but also the broader gay community. So there's a lot of bear stuff there. There's a lot of the women's community. Um, Organizations I way predate me. He's got there. I mentioned one of my judges was Susie Shepard. Uh, he, Susie and KT Chase are still around in the community. Andy contacted Susie when he was working on the Oregon Leather project, and say, "Hey, do you still have?" Um, so, backing up in, huh, missed my history. Um, but 94 when Tony unveiled the leather pride flag at International Mr. Leather, 93, 94.
If you hadn't set a date, no, it
Uh,
was, I want to say it's 89.
89. Yeah, I like
I,
that number better.
I think it's 89.
Someone else is going to Google it for us. Susie Shepherd was there. She was International Ms. Leather, IMSL. She went back home and then probably called Tony and said, "Hey, so what was that flag thing you had up there on stage?" got the specs, had a local seamstress stitch together a leather pride flag based on that phone call, based on Susie's remembrances of what Tony presented at IML as a prototype for the community. And it flew in Portland's Pride Parade that year.
Nice.
First public flying of the Leather Pride flag. The following weekend, it flew in San Francisco and New York's Pride parades. But that original flag that Susie had stitched, had a seamstress stitch for the Portland Pride Parade, she still had. And she gave that to Andy Mangles for the Oregon Leather History Project. And he still has that.
Nice.
Super nice.
You know, that's where my mind was going. Where's that flag?
Where's the flag? Yes. Andy's got it. It's stowed safely in a nice box. And yes, on occasion, he brings out the part of the Oregon Leather History Project to events, and that original Leather Pride flag is always prominently displayed.
Nice. Very nice. So you've had quite the journey. You 2 titles, ran for a couple more. Lots of experience there with that. Obviously, lots of community service, and still doing such things.
And
Tell
still
me,
doing such things.
tell me how your journey intermingles with Tony and Andrew. So it starts with uh, Tony is your judge, and you get an invite to their parties, which I can imagine were just fantastic.
They were. Um,
Managed to mind your P's and Q's, and get a return invite.
yes. So I'd gone to a few of those. At let's see here. A few years later, a couple years later, I guess, just a couple years. Andy Mangles's partner, now husband, Don Hood, was making Leather Pride flag shirts, just like a black shirt, and then the kind of almost like a Western shirt. So the upper part was the Leather Pride flag, kind of, yeah, neat thing.
Right.
Had made one for Tony. Tony was going to some conference or some leather event, as he did. I was over at Andy and Don's house. Don asked if I could drop that by uh, their house on my way home. It was not on my way home because Tony was leaving for this conference in a couple days. Yeah, sure, whatever. So I did. Went down to their house. They were in the south suburbs of Portland, West Lynn. Um, Chatted a little bit, mingled a little bit. They were just having a quiet evening, reading in the library, if I remember right. But made more of an impression then that about a week later, Andrew called my home and home phone and left a message, wanting to know if I'd be interested in playing. I was like, um, still very, very much of a novice in the leather scene, well, in the BDSM scene specifically.
Certainly relative to the two of them.
Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, so lots of thoughts went through my head at that point. Said yes, spoiler alert, I guess. Set up a point. Well, it turns out Andrew had called because since Tony was gone to that conference, he was alone that weekend and wanted to know if I wanted to play that weekend. Didn't happen. It was a couple weeks later. But ended up being occasional, fairly regular, every couple months, play partners with Andrew. They had a very open relationship, so not an issue there. In fact, a lot of times when I would over, Tony would make all three of us dinner, and then Andrew and I would go downstairs and play.
And Tony was quite the chef, as
Tony
we
was quite
understand.
the chef,
Okay.
as was Andrew.
Okay.
They were both quite accomplished in the kitchen. Yeah.
So this just starts from Tony being your judge, and a leather favor, essentially your holiday parties, and then a handy leather favor that that puts you on the radar for a little something further. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
How little things
Make a big impact.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As Tony got to be more and more sick, um, I was, yeah, the play sessions were a little less frequent. But then after Tony died, Andrew had a memorial service a private memorial service for close friends at the house. Was not invited, but Andrew invited me a few days after that to help clean up. And that sounds weird saying it now, but that also there was a strong enough bond where it's something that he could have me over and take care of.
It's kind of a trust thing. It's who would I trust to be around right now kind of situation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So
how long between Mr. Oregon State Leather and meeting Tony as your judge? How long was this friendship and interactions?
so the title was August of 97. Excuse me. Tony died in July of 2000.
So about 3 years, roughly.
Following Tony's death, Andrew and I hung out a little bit more, and started doing other things than just playing in the dungeon and dinner. And realized that there was more of a connection there. And we became partners that autumn. Yeah, I don't remember the exact date, November-ish, 2000. So, yeah.
Tell me about we talked about in talking about this interview. A lot of folks know who Tony is and what all Tony did and all of that. Tell me a little bit about Andrew and how, because I don't think very many people, I didn't, I know a lot of folks probably don't. Tell me about just a little bit about Andrew as far as who he was, and like you and I talked about, what he did that allowed Tony to do what Tony did. How did that work?
Okay, so you're right. Everyone, I hope everyone and a lot of people know the name Tony DeBlas. Probably not so much Andrew. Andrew was a native Chicagoan. That's where they met. Uh, Tony was actually married at the time. His wife passed about the time Andrew and Tony got together. Andrew was a psychiatrist in the Chicago area with a very successful practice, as I gather. And from my perspective, it was Andrew's success that allowed Tony to kind of be who Tony was, so that he could, start putting out the Dungeon Master magazine, the newsletter, and that grew into the magazine, that allowed him to really kind of grow and expand his leather presence. It was when Dungeon Master magazine really took off. The first few issues were about 2 pages ledger size, the 11 by 17, so folded in half, so 8 pages roughly. About 3 issues in, it had expanded to 16, and another 2 or 3 issues, it was up to like 32 pages. So it mushroomed that quickly with that much in that short of a time frame. It really took off. Within just a few issues, they started doing ads, classifieds, and making money and paying for itself and all that stuff.
Magazines can make money.
Yes. Yes.
It's an interesting concept.
Well, again, this is back in the day. Um, so that would have been mid-late 80s, I believe. Someone will fact check me on the dates, but Dungeon Master, I believe that was about that time frame. The success of Dungeon Master magazine kind of put Tony on the national leather stage. And because of that, they bought Drummer magazine. And I say they, Andrew had the money. Andrew, from Andrew's psychiatry practice, he had the bankroll. He actually owned Drummer magazine. Tony was a publisher. Technicality, but there it is. So Dungeon Master magazine's success springboarded into Drummer magazine. They packed up shop in Chicago, moved to San Francisco. Actually, I had a house on the just off Castro. Andrew hated it, sold it, and moved to Los Gatos. Another story. Would rather drive an hour commute into San Francisco from Los Gatos every day to Drummer magazine than live in the inner city of San Francisco.
Probably just the city in general.
From
what you've told me about where they ended up, it sounds like,
well, it was this, and this will sound funny in today's world, and especially in Portland, where Portland and a lot of other cities, including San Francisco, are dealing with such a huge homeless problem. At the time, San Francisco had a huge homeless problem, and the beggars, in Andrew's words, Andrew said the beggars were fearless for begging outside of your house, outside of your business, outside of the restaurant that you just had dinner at. And he wouldn't put up with that. So yeah, moved to Los Gatos. Fast forward a few years, the Meese report, the San Francisco earthquake, et cetera, Drummer was a very losing proposition. Andrew sold it to Rob of Amsterdam on contract, and they fled back to the Portland area. Andrew's medical license had a reciprocal in Washington State, so they were going to move to Seattle, but then realized that they were spending more and more time in Portland on the way to Seattle and decided to make Portland their home. Bought 5 acres south of town in rural West Lynn, and built their dream house. Very much their dream house. Gorgeous, lovely place. I know a few people online have been there and have good memories of it, as do I. Just after it was built, Robert of Amsterdam defaulted on the loan to Andrew. So the construction loan never was paid off. Andrew had to go back to work, which he hated, resented. But the arrangement was Andrew would work, Tony would do leather stuff. So that allowed him to run the household. So that allowed Tony to cook, take care of Andrew, and do all the things in the leather community that we remember him for.
So was Andrew more of a quiet person, didn't want to be in the spotlight? That was his chosen?
Yes.
That's where he wanted to be.
Yeah. He was happy not being in the spotlight. He was never a member of Chicago Hellfire Club. Tony was. Probably, I think, because of his profession, being a psychiatrist, didn't want really to have his name on the membership rolls, and had Tony. Tony would take him to the clubhouse. Tony would take him to Inferno. All that stuff. So kind of didn't need to be. And I think he was a very private person. And I think he was happy not being.
That's kind of what I figured from the way everything sounds. That's exactly where he wanted to be, and that was where he was.
All the perks and not quite the responsibilities.
Yeah. Have you met Tony? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
talk to Tony. Right, talk to Tony. So that's amazing. So Andrew was kind of the motivation, or not the motivation, the creator of the ability for all of the travel and the events and
enabler. I'll throw that word out.
That's probably the right word, right?
Yeah. Well, enabler and encourager.
Yeah.
So yes, Andrew very much did encourage Tony that way, and enabled him to go out and do the things.
And he did a lot of them.
He did a lot of them.
So what was the 3 years like being friends with them and interacting? A lot of us have never. I never got to meet Tony. I certainly never met Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
What were they like to hang out with? What was that like?
Very low key. Very casual. Both quite intelligent. Tony had a wicked sense of humor. Andrew's sense of humor was more Austrian. I'll mispronounce it. Schadenfreude. A very dry sense of humor, but just as wicked. That night years ago when I took the leather pride shirt over to Tony, I was, well, horrified. Andrew met me at the door and had on a kind of an old worn t-shirt and sweatpants that had a rip on the back thigh. He's like, what? And mind you, I mentioned they had built their dream house. It was, depends on how you counted it, 10 or 12,000 square foot mansion on 5 acres. So not a suburban track house at all. Big, gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful house. And they're wearing an old t-shirt and a ripped pair of sweatpants. But it was a casual night at home for them. There's no time to get dressed up or have any kind of pretense.
Right.
Uh, dinners at their house were always lovely. Um, I'll say 2 or 3 courses usually. But you can throw a nice salad together and have that as a first course and nice main course, and then a little tart or something you happen to have baked that afternoon for a dessert course, and
And when
amazing
you're
little.
both and when you're both foodies and chefs, that's what you're doing a lot probably. So
Yeah,
wow.
yes. And they were. Tony was a member of let's see here, Portland Culinary Alliance and the International Association of Culinary Professionals, IACP. He had published a few articles, several articles, a few articles at least, in well, about food in different magazines. I know I've already given over to the Carter Johnson an article he wrote on chili origins and history of and stuff like that for a gay cowboy magazine, if I remember right. Um, and so Tony is a published cookbook person. Um, I mentioned they were hanging out in their library. Oh, a drool worthy library, 2-story, floor to ceiling, oak paneled library lined with books everywhere. Um, but then in the kitchen, they had the kitchen library, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bookshelves just of cookbooks and cooking magazines and stuff. The kitchen had 2 islands in it. Tony apparently used to joke that it was Sicily and Corsica. Yeah. So yeah, very much the foodies, very accomplished chefs. So yes, but simple little 3-course meals you kind of throw together of stuff, and so not the big elaborate dinner party stuff, but just the simple little 3-course meals.
Did you ever go to any events with them or see them in that frame?
No.
Just the local stuff?
Yeah.
How involved were they locally?
Not especially, really. Um, and after Andrew and I got together, again, I was a stalwart attendee of the Portland Leatherman potlucks. Andrew mentioned that he had gone one time, and I don't remember him attending. One time when Tony was out of town, he had made a nice leg of lamb for the potluck, which didn't go over very well, bless his heart. I'm sure it was lovely, but Portland Leatherman potlucks are more church potluck casseroles than haute cuisine. So I'm unfortunately the leg of lamb did not go over well, and so Andrew never went back.
Oh
Um,
no.
yeah, until I hooked up with him and had moved in, and then kept talking about this organization. We need to go. We need to go. And again, we made nicer dishes, but more on the casserole side of things.
On the
Uh,
level of the
yeah,
potluck. Right.
dialed it back a little bit. And had he willingly went many times, many times, and enjoyed himself. Um, He usually sometimes we would both bring a dish, not just one, like a main course and a dessert. He would joke we did it that way so that we'd make sure we had something nice to eat. And nothing against the members
No,
of
that's when
Portland
you're used
Leatherman.
to, when you're cooking for yourself all the time and there's two of you, and yeah,
Yeah, we have
you're on
standards.
another level. Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
And apologies to anyone from Portland Leatherman that are listening or will be listening.
Oh no.
Nothing personal. Yeah.
You see, he was just a little picky on the level of food, and
Yes.
had arrived there honestly. So
And that way I assured him of having something nice for dinner. That was diving a bit into my relationship with Andrew. Shortly after he and I got together and I moved in, shortly after, as in a couple months, he was diagnosed with cancer. So a lot of the 5 years, 6 years we spent together was me kind of taking care of him as best I could. Um,
tough,
yeah.
tough. And when did we lose Andrew?
Andrew died November 2006.
So I want to kick this back to you. I'm just looking through my notes that I made when we talked.
Sure.
Tell me about the Oregon Boot Black contest.
Oregon Boot Black contest. So I mentioned as part of my community service. Let's see, mid 2000s, I returned to the board of Blackout Leather Productions as president. Just a year or two in, I saw the need for a boot black title in Oregon. So kind of talked around. There was a boot black organization in the area. Talked to a couple of boot blacks, made sure, well, wanted to make sure I wasn't off base and to kind of get a little bit of buy-in. I felt the support was there, pitched it to the board, and we created the Oregon State Boot Black title.
When was that? What year? What would the first year have been?
Uh,
Don't have to be dead on. Give me
didn't
a
know there was
give me a
going to be a
ballpark.
quiz.
Sorry.
2008,
Okay.
7, 8,
Yeah, just as long as
somewhere
ballpark. Ballpark.
ish. Well, let's see here. No. Yeah, probably 8. Um,
Still ongoing.
and then had no one run.
Uh,
Oh, turns out the boot blacks didn't want to compete against each other, so eh. Arm twisted someone, Nick Elliott, eventually bit, accepted, whatever, filled out an application, kind of the way I did, days before the contest. And I was over at their house, kind of helping them fill it out, grabbing it from them, taking it back to the board, whatever.
forcing their hand.
Forcing your hand, holding their hand while they signed the application. Yeah, no. So we had one boot black run for the new boot black title, which he won. And then went on to win International Mr. Boot Black in Babuba.
Wow.
Next year we had another same situation. Arm twisted one boot black to actually run for the title. I believe that was Sammy. And again went to IMBB, and won International Mr. Boot Black.
Wow.
Third year had Ah,
I was gonna say
Dara?
third year sounds like there would be people interested in running because they keep going on and winning the
Yeah.
international. That's the place to go.
Uh, uh, Dara ran for International International Oregon Blue Black, won, went off to compete at IMSBA, International Ms. Blue Black, and won.
So 3,
Yeah, fourth year couldn't find anyone.
because they knew they'd end up being international.
Too much pressure, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, created the Oregon Boot Black title, 3 international boot black titles out of the first 3 years, and then couldn't find anyone to run the fourth year.
because they yeah,
Uh,
don't lose. It's
yeah,
it's a thing.
yeah,
Wow, I can see the pressure there. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So again, some more community service. A couple of things you wanted me to mention: the San Mutopian branding
I did.
iron. I wrote it down.
Okay. Well, so the branding iron, that is an artifact that I found in the workshop at Andrew and Tony's house. Uh, in amongst the small power tools and screwdrivers and stuff in a drawer, and decided I did not need it. So brought it over in my suitcase and deposited it at the Carter Johnson Leather Library a year and a half ago when I visited, coming up to 2 years. Um, yeah. So after, so Tony died in 2000, Andrew died in 2006. Sold, I inherited the estate, sold the house, and then had to move all the everything's out in 2000, and have been left with boxes and boxes and boxes of precious treasures, i.e. crap.
Easy.
Yeah, precious treasures that are
Much better.
migrating their way over to the Carter Johnson. Plug for them. They're the branding iron amongst them. Actually, sorry, let me disappear off screen for just a sec here. I am coming to you live from my dungeon in my basement, and I'm staring across the room at the wall of floggers and paddles, and I see a couple paddles there, one of which has a fairly good impression of the branding iron. So
Nice.
samples.
Absolutely.
So one moment, please.
Mama says treasures. Also says that the San Mutopian branding iron is in the Efren Gonzalez room, proudly displayed.
Woohoo! Yay for proudly displaying. Yeah, sneak back in my chair. So, nice little wooden paddle you can see here.
Hang on, I'm going to remove me so we can all see this
Yeah.
pic.
San
Nice.
Utopia University.
Very nice.
So the crest, let's see here, is a mirror cap, cirrus cap across the top. Let's see here. Whoop. There's a S and M there. Bald, I think that's a flogger. Can't quite see what all it is. And then San Utopia University, which I probably should explain. We've mentioned it a couple times. Really weird word. But think of it this way: S and M Utopia. In Dungeon Master magazine, Tony had a serial of stories, as in little episodic stories about this S&M Utopia in a walled neighborhood in some unnamed city. Um, it it would be wonderful to go back and just publish those stories as a compendium or something. Not compendium, that wrong word. As a series of short stories. Um, they're fascinating reading. Just this little fantasy land of what the leather world could look like if ever. Um, anyway, so this little fantasy land that Tony created, I think even two, he had guest writers writing stories about San Utopia. Um, not sure, but I that was my impression. Um, but then also that became a thing. And then San Utopia University became a thing. Um, I know I have a couple t-shirts from Andrew and Tony with the San Utopia logo around on the t-shirts as San Utopia University instructor and stuff like that. So
I actually have a picture of Tony doing a class in the mine shaft wearing the San Utopia University t-shirt. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and it's an amazing thing. And that was a little more geared. San Utopian Guardian was a little more geared towards everybody. Correct? It was a
yes.
yeah.
San Utopia Guardian came later on in the publishing histories, and is very much geared more towards the pansexual, broader BDSM community, not the gay folk, not the gay men, certainly. Um,
Wasn't in an individual sides. It was every kind of an everybody
yeah,
pan, if
yes,
you will, kind of a. Yeah.
totally.
We're gonna bring Mama on. She's graciously volunteered to pop in for us, and she has a little treasure that I would like to hear the story of.
My personal treasure or the two you asked me to pull up?
The two I asked about.
Because I was going to talk about this one,
Oh,
which never leaves my desk. Uh, for those who can closely see it, there's a bat on that blade. The Desmodus, and we say the Desmodus because it was Tony's favorite bat. And of course, Fledermaus means bat. And it serves as a wonderful, sharp thing. It serves to remind me of one of the few men I ever called daddy. And it constantly reminds Jill that if she ever takes it off my desk, it might be the only thing that gets her maimed.
yes, the two leather things. I would
Ah,
like Tom to tell us about the two leather things.
but these are the things you were curious about.
The Christmas stockings.
I know these should be at the library, but
Well,
they
it's
kind
not
of get
Christmas,
hung around the house at Christmas.
and stockings should be hung.
Thank you, Mama. Yes, tell us about the stockings because I love those.
They are just amazing. They are, yeah, just absolutely amazing. Um, so as I said, about a year and a half ago or so, I got to visit the Carter Johnson, and took a suitcase of treasures, the brand, the bat knife, a master's cap, and the two Andrew and Tony Christmas stockings. Um, Andrew and I would always hang those on our mantle every Christmas. And another one for me. I didn't have a leather one, but that was uh, I felt they belonged up there, so we always put those up. They are beautifully made, incredible craftsmanship. Um, I believe they were made by Kelly Ferris here in the Portland area, master leather worker. Um, but I'm that's my assumption. Um, Kelly also made the original Oregon State leather, Mr. and Ms. Oregon State leather sashes and my back patch, my title vest. But yeah, the Christmas stockings are just well, they're Christmas boots with lace up fronts and the heel and all of that. They're just gorgeously crafted, and then of course studded with Andrew and Tony.
I walked into the workroom and I was like, "Ooh, what are those?" And of course,
Yes,
as soon as you spread them apart and you see the names, you know where they're from,
what they
and you're
are.
just like,
Yeah,
and then you're like, "Ooh, yeah."
yeah. And also, I didn't need them at my house. Carter Johnson does.
Treasures. They're treasures, Tom.
Yes, they are. And I'm happy that the library has them.
Okay. Do we want to talk about the Iowa ball stretcher? Is that
Okay,
something we can talk about here?
sure. So that was also something else I found in their workshop, wood shop, is this little wooden jig. Um, and in pencil, Tony had written Iowa ball stretcher. Um, Found a reference to it in a Drummer magazine, uh, a letter to the editor from a gentleman in Iowa had created a ball stretcher, um, kind of pulling down and out.
Vague. Let's be
Um,
vague.
yeah. Yeah. So Tony had worked together this jig out of some scrap lumber and things to drill the two dowels, well, three dowels, um, to put together the Iowa ball stretcher. So I found the original jig, and again, carved that off to the Carter Johnson, with pages, photocopy pages of the Drummer magazine article, because there's a letter to the editor in one issue, and then the following issue or two later was an article by Tony saying, "Oh yeah, that article, I made it. Here's the schematic. This is what I did. Blah blah blah." It's it's an interesting little piece of CBT bondage. Um, Very DIY. I don't feel that it works especially well, but there it is. Something fun.
Again, I'm going through the notes. Uh, this is the one that I've been looking forward to hear. Tell me about Andrew haunting you.
About Andrew haunting?
Andrew haunting you.
Haunting me. Oh, haunting me. Uh so I mentioned Andrew had cancer. He had pancreatic cancer, actually.
Oh,
Yeah, the really nasty, very, very lethal, all the time type of cancer.
yes. I've
That
lost an
all,
uncle. Yes, to that. It
yeah,
was like, hey, I've got this gone. So yeah, nasty,
yeah.
nasty.
Usually, and that kind of became the running joke with the doctors because they kept saying 3 to 5 months, 3 to 5 months timeline. He lasted for just a couple months shy of 5 years.
Wow.
It's like the 3 percentile survival rate. Yeah. Um, but so that really colored our relationship. Um, if this person you're with is going to die within 3 to 5 months, your timelines shift and priorities shift and everything changes. Um, in a way, it was almost never a real relationship because there was that timeline of it's not going to be here in a few months. We just never know. Well, yeah, that was the other running joke, 3 to 5 months. We just never knew when it was going to start. The 3 months timeline was going to
That's
start.
good.
Yeah. Towards the summer of 2006, it was clear he started to go downhill. So we made some final arrangements. We picked out a gravesite for him. And I kept saying, and Tony too, right? And Tony too. It's like, well, yeah, me and Tony too. Because all this time, Tony was sitting in an urn on Andrew's mantle. And I did not want to be the one responsible about where's Tony's ashes got to be put. So, and Tony too. So we visited a few cemeteries, found a nice one out kind of the western suburbs of Portland. And that's where they are both buried. Yeah. Towards the end, I think Andrew was kind of teasing me that he was going to come back and haunt me. I says, please do. You're welcome to. Yeah. I don't think I brought it up, but yeah, he was teasing me that he was yeah. So, after he passed, he kind of did. Um, when sometime after was starting to clear out the house and in preparation for moving out and selling it, started to sell some of the books in their library. Again, this was 2-story, floor to ceiling, both floors, books. Room size was, I think, 20 foot by 25 foot. So big room, really tall, lots and lots of books. Contacted a local bookseller. She came in and brought a couple boxes of books, and as you can imagine, it was kind of drooling when she saw the library and was going through and spent a few hours going through like book by book and just picking out her favorites or the nice books or things that she could resell, I'm sure. But it was kind of a passion project. It's like, oh my god, this book too, and this. Their library, the main floor was more reference, biography, the sciences, medical stuff like that. The second floor was the fiction, just fiction. So it was a fairly complete in that way, I suppose, library. And she spent a couple hours and just pulling off, for out of the love of books. And she came back 2 or 3 times, or 3 or 4 or 5 times or something, as her budget would allow, or as books would sell. She could buy some more books, so would come back and buy some more books from me. Quick background on the house. Big fancy house. The doorbell was an intercom. So when you rang a doorbell on the front door or the back door, it was an intercom which rang through the phone system. It had a commercial grade phone system in the house with a phone tree in the basement and all that. 2 different phone lines, office phone, so you could pick up a phone line, put it on hold and transfer it to a different extension, the whole bit, because so when the doorbell rang, the phones would ring in the house like someone was calling, but it was a different ring, so you could tell someone was at the doorbell, and you pick up the phone, you can talk through the intercom to whoever's at the front door. When this book buyer was in the house, the doorbell rang like once or twice. It's like, well, who's at the door? And I went to the door and there's like no one there. Didn't think anything of it. Again, she made a couple trips in every time the doorbell would ring like once in the couple hours she was there. Like, okay, this is odd. So the doorbell didn't, we were out in the country. The doorbell seldom rang. No one came to the door. And now it's ringing and there's no one there. So it's not like kids pranking or anything. No, there's a glitch in the system. As I say, after she'd been there a couple times, I brought in another bookseller, Powell's Books, here in Portland. Some of you may know Powell's Books. I think they call themselves the world's biggest independent bookstore in the world. They're huge. They have an entire city block downtown. They're amazing, wonderful books. You go in, they give you a map of the bookstore, so you can find your way around. There's the entire city block, and there's like 5 buildings, and multiple different floors and levels, and it's huge, really neat bookstore. Highly regarded on that stuff. I called Powell's Books, like, I've got a library to sell. So 2 of them showed up, bunch of boxes, and they went through the library, not quite like Locus, but it was very corporate, very commercial. It was like, this book, not that book, this book, that book, not that one, that one, this one. Went through it, filled the boxes, wrote me a check, because they knew that it was to resell books. It was like, what books can they make money on? Not for the passion, not for the love of books, but what books can they resell and make money on? The doorbell rang about every 5 minutes while Powell's Books was there looking at the bookshelves. Continually ringing. No one is at the door. The doorbell kept ringing. Andrew's ghost, I'm sure, was unhappy with the energy that they brought with them.
The disrespect of his library.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, Andrew came back and haunted me. That's the only thing I can make. And they left, and the doorbell quit ringing.
Now, did it only happen when people were there digging through the books?
Mostly. Once or twice otherwise, almost kind of random.
So clearly a thing tied to the library.
And his books.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Any other things that you can think of that you want to tell us before I look and see if we have any questions?
I don't think so.
What didn't I get out of you, Tom? What didn't I get out of you?
There's a whole lot of stuff. Yeah.
We should go ahead and schedule episode 2 then as well.
Still clearing out the garage and the storage unit and the basement, and lots and lots of stuff still to migrate their way towards the Carter Johnson Leather Library and Collection, because they are awesome and I love them and I support them. Much more here.
That just about covers the patronage of CJLC. And I think we've kind of gotten across in the stories of just the small mentions you've made of the treasures that you've sent, where that came to be is as you're going through. Essentially, Tony and Andrew were together. We lost Tony. You end up as a friend and interacting with Andrew, taking care of him during that, end up with Andrew. So kind of by just a random way, you end up with Tony and Andrew's stuff, essentially. And a lot went to the LAM. You said stuff, right?
I was just gonna say, after Tony died, Joseph Bean came and spent about a month at the house with Andrew, and they packed up some 30 boxes and shipped back to Chicago. Wasn't there? Was it around? Don't know what all was there. When I visited the Leather Archives and Museum, they showed me down behind the closed door the boxes and boxes of Tony archives. Like, no, it's a box has his name on it. I don't know what's in it. His paper is great. Going through the house, living in the house, going through the house, even sleeping in Tony's bed. There's literally
with Tony on the mantle.
well, no, that was in Andrew's bedroom. Tony had his own bedroom. There was the whole rest of his life, not his paper so much,
Right.
although some, but the rest of his life, well, like the Christmas stockings, like the branding iron, uh,
Stuff that makes the man. Stuff that rounds
Andrew's
out who he was. Yeah.
Andrew's Chicago Hellfire vest overlay, Tony's IML judge's satin jacket, all the t-shirts, the paddle, all the rest of the stuff, that some of the dungeon equipment I use, a lot of the kitchen equipment I use, a lot of the rest of it I don't need, and happy to give it to the Carter Johnson, for
all of us to see.
For all times and for the rest of the community.
I do have a very interesting question for you. I don't know if you have an answer.
What
I
an
have no
interesting
clue.
question.
We haven't talked about this, but this one popped in.
Okay.
When Tony created the pride flag, he never specified what the colors were.
Correct.
There are stories that he nearly told or never quite came out. Do you have any insight into what the colors might have meant to Tony?
Nope.
Just wanted to ask. There are people present who would, they'd be like, you should have asked him. I could just hear it. They were starting to hear the voices in my head, and that one occurred to me.
Almost a holy grail. Yes, I can see where you're going, and no, I have no insight at all. I did ask Andrew, kind of in a quiet time at one point, did Tony ever mention? It's like, no. Yeah, so much for that. Andrew didn't romanticize that stuff, so
right. It's just like I said, that's a question that's kind of been out there since he presented it, and you seem to have a very unique perspective on them. I thought maybe it might have come up in a conversation you overheard one time.
Yep. Absolutely no insight.
I'm going to open. Sorry.
It is left to the community to decide what it means to them. How about that?
Yep. And I think it's interesting that way. It would be nice to know what Tony's intentions were, but if we don't, we don't, and we'll put our own color twists on them. So.
Yep. And that's the right answer. There is none.
Right. Does anybody have any questions? I imagine Mama might have a million for you. Do we want to just cue Mama up here? She unmuted. No, I thought she was muted already. She leaned forward and there we go. She did that.
What are you doing with Andy on the Portland History Project?
What am I doing with him on that?
Yeah.
Quietly, gently supporting him. He is not a 501c3, so I don't feel compelled, or I don't give him, I don't financially support him as much as I do the Carter Johnson. I've helped him relocate the archives a couple times when he needs to find a new storage location for them. I have been intending to spoiler alert, if Andrew or Andy and Don ever watch this video, I'm intending to have a Godfather moment with them and sit them down. And so all of this stuff, it would be really nice if it ended up at the Carter Johnson at some point. And maybe like a Carter Johnson Portland annex at some
Yes.
point. Those types of questions, but that conversation has not happened yet.
Or to help him go 501, he's sitting on a treasure trove for a unique area of the country and a time and place that was part of the founding of our modern movement. Portland was the cornerstone for so much.
Yeah.
The Portland, Seattle area, it was the birthplace of the NLA.
Living in Leather.
Even of the Doomed Rabbit, of so many amazing groups, as well as Andy's mag. Didn't he put out International Leatherman? Or, I'm sorry, Meta Uniform?
In Uniform, the magazine.
Yeah.
And In Uniform, the video.
And that, and so very much more. Don't get me wrong, I'm greedy as hell. That needs to stay in its area. It's too important to the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
He needs a board of directors. He needs a 501. He needs a location.
Having a location would be ideal. Publicly accessible location. As I understand it, he does not want the shackles of a 501c3. However, I'm envisioning, dreaming of a merger with the Carter Johnson.
I'm going to point out that this might be a good time to say that we can have this conversation in a private forum at some point in time. I think we got the question. Let's not go too deep there on recording.
Andy has his ideas, and I need to work on him. Full stop.
I would like to say thank you, Mama. I had the honor of actually the mannequin that I have here. We came across the opportunity to get 4 mannequins when a mall locally was shutting down, and they were, getting rid of all of the furnishings. And I managed to get a hold of 4 of them, and 2 of them went to the library about the same time that Tony's IML judge jacket and Andrew's overlay arrived. So I got to put the mannequins in and put the overlay and Tony's jacket on them, which you can see on the CJLC YouTube page. There's actually a tour of that room, and you see those there. And then the covers arrived, and I got to put the stands up. We have little hat stands on the wall, so the covers are there beside the overlay of the jacket. So Tony and Andrew are hanging in the Tony and Andrew, the Tony DeBlas magazine room.
Nice.
So I've coincidentally arrived along with some of your packages and got to put some of the significant pieces out onto display.
With some of my baggage?
No, I don't think I saw any of the baggage. Did do an unboxing video with Mama. We got to go through Tony's kind of personal papers. The one that had yearbooks and a couple of report cards and some of his professional science and bats and those things, and all very interesting. And we looked at it as I think the comment was, you can't have a Leatherman without the man. And this is the kind of stuff that rounds out the man. So it's significant stuff. It really is. But everyone, Tom, has generously sent a lot of that sort of thing to the Carter Johnson. If you weren't familiar with Tony, and Andrew, before tonight, I would highly encourage you to look into it when you have time. Look into Tony. There, he was involved in a lot of stuff that that got us to where we're at now. And again, which the conversation that started getting this episode going is the Andrew aspect of, without that you wouldn't have the other, the support and the encouragement and the enabling that you talked about. Does anybody have any questions? Please feel free to raise your hand. Anybody? Scott, Wolf, are there any questions? I think this worked out as I envisioned it. It's you have a journey, and your and I's journey kind of coincide time frame wise. We're of similar age and found the community around the same time, so it was really interesting to hear your journey. And I just, such a unique perspective on those two. And I learned so much about Andrew talking to you and listening to you tonight that I think it's important that Andrew is remembered alongside Tony, where apparently they are now.
Indeed. Indeed,
So,
yes.
Seriously, anybody questions? I really appreciate you coming on. A fascinating. I really got it. It's very interesting to hear you were kind of cast into the first title days before, kind of grabbed by the elbow and, hey, run for this.
Yeah, persuaded, cajoled.
You know, we need to ask a lot of title holders those questions, because I kind of think that's how it works for a lot of us. Because I'm very similar here, and then as a community service, getting a title, which I think is fantastic, because that's a big ask. Would you consider stepping into it as a title holder? And a lot of people don't understand what goes on your title year. I think a lot of people think it's kind of a fanfare thing, and now you think you're somebody. But there's a lot of community service, a lot of travel, a lot of time taken up in a title year and doing the obligations that the titles, and they all have different ones. But you know, we talked about World. There was a lot of obligations that went with World. So, you know, the first runner-up wasn't necessarily the worst thing ever. So
Indeed.
you express that too. And it's wonderful to hear an IML tale, what it was like to be an IML, which apparently is just kind of dreamy, and a brotherhood and the camaraderie, and all very interesting to me.
Yeah.
If no one has any questions,
I have one.
Here we go.
I do not know a lot of the history for the PLA, so I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Okay. Portland Leather Alliance. Full disclosure, I suppose, I am not a member. So it's a little bit hearsay. My understanding is it grew out of the NLA, National Leather Association Portland chapter. There was some drama within the Portland chapter. I believe I heard rumors that NLA pulled the charter from the Portland chapter. So this was like 96, 7. So NLA Portland rebranded as Portland Leather Alliance and continued forward. They are still around. They're still a very vibrant organization within the Portland community. They host Kink Fest every year, Easter weekend. So March, April, depending on when Easter falls. Big BDSM weekend, pulling in speakers and guests from around the country.
So that actually makes me think of, Mama mentioned the importance of the Portland area, and you mentioned a couple of groups and events. So can you kind of just give me just off the top of your head, the list of, you mentioned Tony and Stephanie, and the people that kind of came from there, and then NLA, living. Did you say living in leather?
Yeah. The
What all originated there that you can think of off the top of your head? I'm not historical accuracy here.
Lots. NLA started, I believe, in Seattle. Portland was one of the very first early chapters. Living in Leather, LIL. Well, I think the first Living in Leather was Seattle. The second, third, and fifth ones were in Portland. Let's see here. 3 of the first IMSLs, International Ms. Leathers, were Portland based at the time. Judy Tolwing McCarthy, of course. Shankar, Susie Shepherd.
Susie, sorry, not Stephanie, Susie. Thank you.
Portland never had an IML or a drummer, international drummer, as I remember. Let's see here, what else?
Well, you mentioned the first 3 boot blacks
Yeah.
came out of.
Well, the other way around. The first 3 Oregon State boot blacks became international titles.
That's
yeah. And within Blackout Leather Productions, their pantheon of titles have now expanded to include, it was Oregon State Puppy, now it's Oregon State Pet, an MX Leather, not Mr. or Ms., but Mix. I want to say one other too, I don't remember. And let's see here, another Mr. Oregon State Leather went on to be, he was a Mr. Oregon State Leather, but he competed for International Boot Black, but won. So yeah, and I think we had we've had 2 of the Oregon Leather titles go on to American Leather Man and Woman. Tobin Britton was American Leather Woman. My ex-husband Dominic was American Leather Man. So there's those kind of histories.
So there is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I have one final question for you.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about the artwork over your shoulder.
That is from JR's Cell, one of the early leather bars in Portland. The Gay and Lesbian Archive, Gay and Lesbian Archives of the Pacific Northwest, calls it the second leather bar in Portland. It was over in Northwest Portland. JR's West was the bar on the main floor. JR's Cell was the basement bar, and that was the leather bar. I bought both posters at an auction a handful of years ago, and I thought he would make a nice backdrop for this interview.
He absolutely did.
Isn't he nice?
And indeed.
I'm still convinced that's you.
The JR's West man, similar pose, but he's more cowboy, shirtless cowboy.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thom, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you for agreeing to participate.
You're very welcome, Matthew.
I love having the stories that I wouldn't have heard had I not met you and asked. So thank you very much.